We'll go ahead. Sure.
All
All right. Good morning, everybody. We are at the bottom line of Chav Daled Amud Beis. We're going to try to get up to the Mishnah right at the top of Vav Amud Aleph. So we're holding right now Chav Daled Amud Beis, the bottom line. And what we were talking about is various ways. We talked yesterday about the Eved Kanani, and the Mishnah talked about the Eved Kanani, can get his own freedom via shtar, via kesef. But we know that there's psukim in the Torah that also talk about shein ba'ayin. If you give the Eved Kanani a particular sort of mum, they also go free. So that's kind of where we were leaving off yesterday, and we'll continue with that a little bit more. So bottom line of Chav Daled Amud Beis. Amar of Chia bar Ashi, Amar Rav, Haiselo Yeseres, V'chatcha, Eved Yotza Behen Lecher. It's kind of an interesting thing. We said that of the Chav Daled Evarim that the Eved Kanani goes free. There are fingers and toes. What if the Eved Kanani had an extra finger on his hand? He had 6 fingers on his hand, and then you take off one of the fingers, right? Does that count or does that not count? So the Gemara says that does count. If you cut off his 6th finger, Yatzav and Lecher, so he will go free. But Amar Rav Huna, there's a little bit of fine print. Huhush and it's beres al gavayad. It's dafka if the 6th finger is kind of somewhere in between these fingers. So I guess if it was like over here or something like that, that wouldn't count. But as long as it's somewhere in between the fingers, maybe it's like a 5th finger, of the 4, then that counts. And if you were to take off one of those fingers, the Eved Kanani would go free. So Sabe de Nizunya, these are the elders of a town called Nizunya. Lo asul pirkei Rav Chizda. They stopped coming to shear by Rav Chizda. So Amar Leil Rav Amnuna. So Rav Chizda said to Rav Amnuna, who must have been one of his talmidim, Vil inu, go put them in cherem. That's the way Rashi says. It's a lashon of niduin, right? They're not coming to shear anymore, so go put them in cherem. Azal Amar Lahu. So Rav Hamnuna goes over to these gentlemen and he said, "My time with lost Rabban Lapirka. Why did you guys stop coming to shear?" Amrule, so they said to him, "Am I nice? Why should we come? We asked him questions. He doesn't answer us." So Rav Hamnuna says back to these gentlemen, Amar Lahu, have you ever asked me a question and have I never answered you? So they asked him, Mahu. If an Adon emasculates his Eved, right? What is the halacha over there? Timum shabagalui dami olo. Is it a mum shabagalui or not? The way Rashi explains the question, right? We're dealing with baits and we're dealing with testicles that are inside a scrotum. So again, you need a mum shabagalui. The scrotum is something that is bagalui, but the testicles are kind of in the scrotum. So how exactly do we view this? If you were to emasculate an Eved this way, is that a mum shabagalui or is it a non-mum shabagalui? And lo havi biyadei, Rav Amnuna didn't know the answer to this question. So Amrulo, so these Sabas and Azunya said to Rav Amnuna, Ma shemecha, what's your name? Amrlu Hamnuna said, my name is Hamnuna. Amrule lab Hamnuna ella Karnuna. It was like a bit of a burn. Rashi says Karnuna is milashon Yoshev Karanos. He said, you're the point is you don't know how to learn. So Asla Gamed Rav Chizda, Rav Amnuna comes back to Rav Chizda, kind of reports the story. And Amar Le, Rav Chizda says to Rav Amnuna, Masnisu Ba'u Minach. They ask you a question from a Mishnah. And thankfully we still have Ozzy for a few more minutes. I think this is going to be in Ozzy's world. This is a Mishnah, I believe, in the 6th parak of Negaim. So just a little bit of a background, right? A little bit of a background. So in Parshas Tazria Mitzorah, this is really the beginning of Tazria, talks about the various types of Negaim and Tzaras and all these different types of things. One of the Negaim is what's known as Michias or Michia. And what it is you have a splotch of Tzaras with some healthy skin in the middle. And the pasuk says, "Lechol mare ene hakohen." That's the end of the pasuk. And the pasuk basically says the Kohen can look at it. It's only going to be a tumas michias if the Kohen can see the entire thing, the entire nega in one view. So the point is what the Mishnah is about to say, and we'll read the Mishnah inside. Let's say you had this michias on like your fingertip. So the Kohen can't see the entire thing because some of it slopes in different directions. The michia would only be if it's like over here and the Kohen can see the entire thing. That's tumas michias. If it's on certain body parts like tips of your fingers and your toes, then it wouldn't be considered a michia. So anyway, the Mishnah says that Tanan, this is again a Mishnah in the 6th parak of Maseches Negaim. Esrim arba rashi evarim. There are 24 limbs. Sheba adam kulam ein mitamim mishum michia. And if you have this nega on these limbs, it wouldn't be michia. The eluhem. These are the 24 things. Rashi etzbaos adayim deraglaim, your fingers and your toes. Rashi adnaim, I guess tips on your ears. Rashi hachotem, your nose. Rashi hagavia, right, your also makam by a man. The Rashi dadim shavi isha, a woman's dadim. It's all kind of the same point. Like if the nega is in a certain spot, so the coin wouldn't be able to see all of it at once. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Av Sheva Ish, even the dadim of a man. So again, you have to understand what the machlokas is over there. B'tani Allah, so that was all with respect to this nega. But bekulam, all of these spots, these 24 Ivarim, Eved Yotze Behem L'cheres. The same way that the Tumas Michya wouldn't be if they were on that body part, same thing. If one of these body parts were taken off an Eved would go free. Rabbi Omer Afasirus, Rabbi adds to the list even someone who emasculates his Eved, and Ben Azai Omer Afalashon. Ben Azai adds to the list even a tongue. So Amar Mar, so Mar said.
So it's a famous Mishnah.
Well, it's Machlokas Tanaim, right? The Tanakama does not say, but why do we understand what Seirus means? So Amar Mar, Rabbi Omer Afaseirus, Seirus Tamai, when you say emasculate, what are you cutting off? Ile Masris, the Gid, if you tell me you're going to take off the actual member, Hainu Gavia. That was already listed in the Mishnah. That was one of the 24 Ivarim. Elalaf, Seirus the Basim. It's got to be talking about emasculating an Eved by removing the Basim. And Rebbe, right? So yeah, period. So as Eddie said, this is Rav Chiz's way of saying to Rav Amnuna, they ask you a shaila, and it's Mefurish Mishnah, it's Machlokas Tanaim. The Tanakama says that wouldn't count. Rebbe says it does count, and presumably Rav Zera also, well, I guess we'll see. But the point is, it's a Machlokas Tanaim, and that's what they asked. And okay, moving along. So again, looking at this list of the Mishnah, the Tanakama listed 24 things.
Said nothing. He should have said it's a
machlokas, exactly. And maybe that's why the Sabbath in Azunia said you were a Yosef Kronos, right? You didn't know this Mishnah in the Nagaim. Whatever it is. Okay. Bottom line though, if you look at the list in Nagaim, you have a Tanakama list 24 things. Rebbe says Af Sirus, right? So including the Beitzim, and then Reb Zera says Af Halashon. So the mashmos is that Rebbe doesn't agree that a tongue would be something where an Eved would go free if you took out his tongue. So Rebbe Omer Af Aserus, the Gemara says Rebbe Lashon Lo. Does Rebbe not hold that a tongue counts? Uraminu, we have a stira. Hare Misha Haya Maze Benitze Haza Al Piv. If someone is sprinkling the the paraduma, and he gets on someone's mouth, Rebbe Omer Kiza. Rebbe says this is good, and the guy, it was a good sprinkling. Chachamim Omrim Lo Hiza, and the Chachamim say it doesn't count. My lav al lashono, and doesn't. What does it mean al piv? Presumably it means on the tongue, right? Now, what does this have to do with us? So again, when you do the maza paradum, it also needs to be on something shavagaloi. So the assumption is that the same way Rebbe's a little bit more permissive, and he says that by an eved it needs a mum shavagaloi, and a galoi includes the scrotum, right? So too in various other parts of halacha, where all you need is something shavagaloi, and a tongue counts, a tongue should also count by an eved. But bottom line, the Gemara says, why? It's a stira. Why does Rebbe say in this Mishnah Negayim that a lashon doesn't count? But we know that by para aduma, he says that a tongue does count. But the Gemara says, no. Why are you assuming that Mishnah means a tongue? All it said was al piv. Lo al svastav. It's not talking about a tongue. It's talking about the lips. But the Gemara says al svastav. Why would anyone even have a havamina that if the meichatas touched your lips, that wouldn't count? Of course that would count. So Ma'ud Sema, he says, no, we would have had a havamina zimna dechalim sifse. You would have thought that people parch their lips, and therefore their lips aren't always something shabagaloi. Kamashmal and Rebbe, who's saying that lips do count. That as long as the paraduma, the mechatas of the paraduma gets on your lips, that counts. Kamash Malan. But the Gemara is not happy with this because the Gemara says Va'atanya al lashon. We have another brisa where the machlokas is mafurish on the tongue, not your lips. But Otani, we have another brisa, B'shanitel rov halashon, Rebbe Omer rov hamadaber b'lshonos. This is a brisa that has to do with himself, like bechoros. So we're talking about different mums that apply to karbanos, specifically a bechor. And there's machlokas Tanakama Rebbe about how much of the tongue has to be removed for this to count as a mum. But the bottom line is Rebbe says that if a portion of the tongue is removed, that counts as a mum. And again, it would be the same thing. The same way a tongue should count to be a mum by a bechar, a tongue should also count that if you took it off an eved, he should go free. So Ella, you're right. You have to say that Rebbe holds that a tongue by an eved should go free. So what does Rebbe mean when he says af serus? Ella, Rebbe Omer serus, v'lo mabaya lashon. He must mean that Seiros counts, and for sure a tongue counts too. And Ben Azai Amar Lashon Abal Seiros Lo. But Ben Azai says that a tongue counts, but he argues and he says Beitzim wouldn't count. Umay af. So what does Reb Zera mean when he says af halashon? Af akamaisa. He doesn't mean af going back on what Rebbe said and adding to Rebbe's list. He's saying af adding to the original list of the 24. So if we kind of review that Mishnah in Nagaim, what we basically have is like this. You have a Tanakama saying there are 24 items, right? Then we have Rebbe saying af hasiros, meaning not only your 24 items, and not only a tongue, but even if you emasculate an evan. Then you have Reb Zera at the end who says, no, I disagree with Rebbe on that last point, not Seirus, but I agree with the first list of 24, and I even say you should have the Lashon. So what the Gemara is about to ask is, we're totally out of order. Wouldn't it have made more sense to have the Tanakama and then have Reb Zera? Reb Zera would have said, I agree with the first list of 24, and I even say a Lashon. And then you'd have Rebbe who would say, I agree with Reb Zera, and I even want to add one more. Why are we going out of order like this? So the Gemara says, Ihachi naktaba de Ben Azai bereisha, right? Why didn't you first put Ben Azai and then have Rebbe? So the Gemara gives an interesting answer. It says, Tana Shema Lita Rebbe. First, the Brisa heard Rebbe's shot, Bekava, and that's how he, wrote this Brisa down. V'shama Lita Ben Azai. And only later on did he hear Ben Azai, the Tani, Umishnah Lozazim in Makoma. And once he heard Ben Azai, he didn't want to disrupt the entire Brisa and have to relearn or reteach the entire Brisa. It's very fascinating Rashi right over here that basically says that, once the Talmidim learned a Brisa a certain way, they memorized it. So it's very hard for them to relearn a Mishnah on a different formulation. So once they had the Mishnah, or the Brisa really, and they had the Brisa down pat, we don't want to disrupt their learning, and we'll just it's easier for them to tack on something at the end rather than to change around the entire order of the Brisa. Okay, bottom line, going weiter, right? We had this discussion, right, about the tongue by the Mechatas. If the Mechatas touches your tongue, does that work or does it not work? Rebbe seems to say that it does work, and therefore a person is tar, and the Rabbanan seem to say it doesn't work. So Amar Ula, Hakol Modim, the Lashon, everyone agrees by the Lashon, the Indian Tuma, de Galuhu, that if Tuma touches your tongue, you become Tame, right? Eitel Lashar. It's my time. Asher Yigabo Amar Rahman. V'hainami bar Nagihu. So again, look at Rashi, he kind of works through exactly what that Josh is. This is a sugya in Mesechas Nidam. Le'inyan Tvila, everyone agrees that Le'inyan Tvila Kitamandam, that if you go into a mikvah, you don't need to open your mouth, right? You don't need the tongue to touch the water. The tongue is considered a hidden, a taman body part, and therefore, as far as the mikvah is concerned, you don't need to open your mouth. My taima, pasuk says, "Barachas b'saro b'mayim amarachmana, my b'saro me'avarai, afkol me'avarai." Lo nechlaku, the entire machlokas Rabbanan and Rebbe is elul in hazah. Rebbe medami le'lotama. Rebbe compares when it comes to mechatas, he compares this to tuma. Just like everyone agrees that a tongue can make something tame, so too a tongue is considered a good body part of the Indian mechatas. And Rabbanan medami lula tefila, and the Rabbanan they compare it to tefila the same way a tongue doesn't need to be tobal in the water, so too it wouldn't work for mechatas. So travayu b'hai kra k'miflagi. And both Rabbanan and Rebbe argue with the same pasuk, right? They darshan their respective side from the same pasuk. The pasuk says, "V'yizah tahar latamei." So again, if you look at the entire pasuk says, this is in the mechatas. "V'yizah tahar latamei." The person who's tar sprinkles on the one who's tamei b'yom hashlishi u'b'yom hashvi v'chitz'o b'yom hashvi, and then he's purified on the seventh day. And then v'chibes begadav, he washes his clothes v'rachatz b'mayim. And then he goes into the mikvah. So Rebbe Sabar, this, and he shall become pure, and he becomes purified. You kind of connect it to the first part of the pasuk, which is talking about someone who is tameh, and therefore the same way that someone's tameh, the tongue works to make someone tameh, so too the mechatas will work on the tongue. Rabbanan Sabar, they look at the back half of the pasuk. They say they say he gets purified on the seventh day, and the back half of the pasuk talks about going to the mikvah. The same way, when you go into a mikvah, you don't need the tongue to touch the mikvah waters. So too, the tongue won't work for the mechatas. So they're each looking at the same pasuk, but one is kind of darshaning the first half of the pasuk, and the other one's darshaning the second half of the pasuk. So Rabbanan nami nidmir letuma. So the Gemara is going to ask, right, on the Rabbanan, why do you hold like Rebbe? So they say tahara mitara, it makes more sense for us to compare mechatas to going into the mikvah. Both of them are acts of purification. So the same way the mikvah doesn't require the tongue, so too the mechatas won't work on the tongue. The Rebbe nidmila tevila. So again, how does Rebbe respond to that? He says, "V'chibes begad the pivsek inyan." I don't like to darshan the pasuk that way because in between of the word that you're trying to darshan and the mikvah, there's a whole other concept in the pasuk of laundering one's clothes. Therefore, I think that's a hefsek, and therefore I learn the way I learn. Okay, but the Gemara has an interesting question. So we just said that Rebbe holds that when it comes to Vila, you don't need to touch your tongue to the mikvah water. So v'savar Rebbe in Vila ketaman dami. But Amar Rabin, Amar Rav Ada, Amar Rav Yitzchak. Ma'isa v'shivcha. There was a story with a certain shivcha Knanis Shalbeis Rebbe Shetavla. She went into a mikvah, but also v'nimsa etzem ben shina, and they realized that she had something between her teeth. V'tzricha Rebbe tvila acheres, and Rebbe required her to go back into the mikvah. So the question is, if the tongue, right, doesn't need to be total in the first place, why do we care if there's a chatzitz in the mouth? What does it make a difference? So the Gemara gives an answer that it gives. Often it says nihida bs mayim lo beinon, but makam haroy levavo mayim inon. Kid Reb Zera, Dam Reb Zera, kol haroy levila ein bila makevesbo, v'she'eno roy levila bila makevesbo. You're right. We don't need you to actually open your mouth under the mikvah, but we need that there not be a chatzitza. We need that there be a possibility, or at least, in theory, that should, right? So this the concept that the Gemara invoked. This is really a sugya minachos that talks about, right, there's certain quantities of flour and oil that you require for certain karbanos, and you need the quantities to be just right, that you should be able to mix the oil into the flour. But the reality is, once you have the quantities just right, you don't actually need to do the mixing. It's as long as it's fit to have been mixed, you don't actually need to mix it. But if you don't have the quantities just right, then the whole thing is bad because you wouldn't be able to mix it. So that's kind of the concept that's invoked. One last Gemara, then we see this Mishnah. So again, we talked at the beginning of the daf about beitzim and what's the status of beitzim. We said it was a machlokas tanaim, so we'll talk about that a little bit more. Tanai, we have a machlokas tanaim. The pasuk is talking about various animals that are brought on the mizbeach and mums of animals. So the pasuk says umauch v'kasus v'nasuk v'karus. If the animal, right, if the member, the testicles are squashed or crushed or torn or severed, kulan the beitzim div Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda learns this pasuk say this is all referring to the beitzim. The beitzim below begid. The Gemara says, what are you talking about? Clearly, the gid is more important than the beitzim. So you're telling me all these things apply just to the beitzim. If the gid had any one of these things, if the gid was crushed or torn, it wouldn't be considered a mum. Ela kulan af beitzim. Rather, what we're talking about is it's af beitzim. Div Rabbi Yehuda. Eliezer ben Yaakov are kulan begid. No, it's dafka the gid. But if this happened to the beitzim, it would be okay. And Rabbi Yossi splits the baby, right? He says ma'uch v'kasus, the first two of being squashed and crushed, af bebeitzim, nasuk v'karus, begid in bebeitzim lo. And now we move on. We have now finished the sugya of avadim, and we're going to move on to kinyanim about other things as well. Kinyanim about how you acquire animals. So the Mishnah says, behema gasa, if you have a very large animal, niknis be misira, maybe even just to practice the Mishnah, we're going to focus on three different types of kinyan, right? There's when it talks, when you're dealing with an animal, you can do a meshicha, a mesira, or a hagba. Hagba is the best form of kinyan around, right? You literally pick up the animal. But again, it's only going to work for animals that are small enough that you can pick up, right? Then there's what's known as meshicha, which is you kind of get the animal to move a little bit, to walk, right? So you literally grab the animal, you call the animal, whatever it is, and you get the animal to walk. And then there's mesira, right? There could be a thing where, let's say, a horse or something that has the reins. You don't even get the animal to move. You just take the reins from the mocher, you put it in the hands of the kona, and that's the kinyan. That's what's known as mesira. So depending on the animal, right, we'll see which one of these three is the most appropriate. So again, we'll start the Mishnah again. Behema gasa, very large animal, niknis b'mesira. That is kona with this idea of handing the reins from mocher to kona. Hagba doesn't make sense because you're not going to lift a horse, right? And even meshicha, apparently the way Rashi understands, it's not going to work because a horse kind of knows its owner, or a large animal, a cow, a horse. It's not going to want to move necessarily to the new owner until you kind of give over the reins, and then maybe he'll appreciate that's my new owner. So okay, that's why mesira works by a large animal, not meshicha or hagba. The hadaka, but a smaller animal, behagba, that works behagba. And the way Rashi explains, when the Mishnah says it works by hagba, it means dafka hagba. So you can't do Masira or Mashicha by the other animals. If it's a Behema Daka and it's small enough you can carry, you literally have to carry it. Divrei Reb Meir, Reb Eliezer. Chachamim omrim Behema Daka niknas b'Mashicha. They say that if a smaller animal can even be Kona b'Mashicha. So Hagba for sure works. But the point is, it doesn't need to be Hagba. It could even be Meshicha. Okay, Darish Rav Bikim Chunya. Rav is giving shir in this town called Kim Chunya. And he said that Behema Gasa Niknas b'Mashicha. He said that Behema Gasa can be Kona with Mashicha, which is connected our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says that Behema Gasa is Kona b'Mesira. So Ashkechinu Shmuel Talmidei de Rav. Shmuel comes to the Talmidim of Rav. Amar Lahu, Mi Amar Rav Behema Gasa Niknas b'Mashicha. Did Rav really say that Behema Gasa can be Kona b'Mashicha? But Anan b'Masira. It's not. Our Mishnah says b'Masira. Not only does our Mishnah say b'Masira, but the Rav Nami b'Masira. I know. I've heard Rav. We had this discussion. Rav holds that a Behema Gasa nikna b'Masira, and now with Mashicha. So Amar Hadar Be'Me'ahi. So Shmuel said, did Rav retract from what his old position? So who to Amar? They said yes, he retracted. He Aitana because he had found another brisa. And the Tanya, this is a brisa. This is in Baba Kama and Baba Basra. The Chachamim Omrim Zu v'Zu nikna b'Mashicha. The Chachamim said that both a large animal and a small animal can both be kona b'Mashicha. So Rav heard this other brisa, and he was chozer. The brisa continues, and the brisa says, Reb Shimon Omer, Zu v'Zu b'Agba. Reb Shimon says that both animals can be kona b'Agba, meaning a small animal and a large animal can be kona b'Agba. So Maskefla Reb Yosef, right? So Reb Yosef heard this brisa, and he said, wait, Reb Shimon says that both a large animal and a small animal can be kona b'Agba, and we said that once you say it can be kona b'Agba, that means it can only be kona b'Agba. So now he says a large animal can only be kona b'Agba, which means you have to lift up the animal. So Maskefla Reb Yosef Elamata Pil Reb Shimon b'Meyikna. How is the guy supposed to buy an elephant? Right? You can buy an elephant, right? How are you supposed to buy an elephant? You can't lift an elephant, right? So Amar Le Abaya says, I don't understand the question. The Khalif. Our Mishnah was talking about 3 different types of kinyanim that apply to when you touch an animal. Hagba, Mashicha, Masira. But there's no question, there's not the only forms of kinyanim around, right? Clearly, Khalifin will work. So when it comes to an elephant, give him a kinyan sutter, whatever it is. Inami Basochares Makomo. Another classic is, right, there's kinyan chatzar. So go to the mocher, say, I'd like to rent your chatzar, wherever this elephant is, for the day. I'll be kona it via the mechanism of kinyan chatzar. Okay, Reb Zera Omer, maybe arba'a kalim. Umanichan tachas raglav. Take 4 large kalim, put it by the elephant's feet, and the elephant will walk into these kalim, and you could be kona through the use of your kalim, be kona the object. So the Gemara, every time this comes up, the Gemara asks a very similar question. So the Gemara says, Shamas mina kalif shalokach reshus mocher kana lokach. Right? This is a sugya of Mitzvah that talks about if you're in the mocher's spot, but you have your kalim, and the mocher puts stuff in his location into your kalim, can the lokach be kona like that or not? This is a sugya of Mitzvah that wasn't resolved, and that seems to be what Zera is suggesting, right? Presumably, this elephant is in the makam of the mocher. You're saying take your kalim, put it by the elephant, let the elephant walk in. Now can we be poshet the shilas? The Gemara says no. Who said we're talking about the mocher's location? Maybe we're talking about that we're in a simta, we're in a spot near Rosh Hashanah where it doesn't belong to the lokach or the mocher. Inami, one last way of being kona an elephant, according to Shimon, is bechavile zemuros, using a bundle of vines. And a large machlokas, Rashi Tosos, exactly how to even understand this answer. Rashi says, Pasha, you take like a platform of vines that's at least 3 tvachim tall, because he has issues of lovehood, and therefore you get the elephant to stand on this platform. That's how you can do hagbar. Tosos says, why are you focusing on vines? Like, just say a stone or a big thing. Are vines, could they even support an elephant, right? Like that doesn't, so Tosos says no. What's going on over here is Chavile Zemarim is Michael Peel. That's what an elephant eats. So wave the vines up high at a circus and get the elephant to like get off its legs to eat the vines. And that's how you will do Hagbah. And we'll stop there at the Mishnah. We'll pick it up tomorrow.
So Mazel Tov to Alan and Jody Gershwin on the birth of a granddaughter.